Welcome back to What's the Good News, the best insider look at the real estate industry as a whole. As always, no courses, no gimmicks, only quality information on how to actually get deals done. We ask questions, we solve problems, and most importantly, we always share the good news.
And I'm your host, Michael Smith, and with me as always is my very attractive co-host, Mr. Dominic Cardarelli. Together, we have over 20 years experience in real estate, and we always love to share the good news. With that, let's go close some deals.
Before we get started, if you like what you see here on What's the Good News, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our latest videos. Let us know your thoughts and if anything we cover here helps you in any of your own deals.
For sure. And today we have on the show Mr. Brian Zoubek. He is the president and CEO of Zoubek Properties. He holds a master's in real estate finance and investment from NYU, as well as an undergraduate degree from Duke University, where he was also an NCAA champion. He now exclusively pursues value-add redevelopment and new construction opportunities in the greater Philadelphia area. He has acquired and developed over 200 apartment units, commercial spaces, and townhomes within the Philadelphia market worth over $60 million. Brian, what is the good news, buddy?
Thanks for having me, Mike.
That's a impressive portfolio you got there, Brian.
Yeah, it was quite a while and quite a few licks along the way to get there, but it's growing steadily and learning and hopefully getting better with each one.
Let's bring it back to the beginning. Where you're from, how you got into real estate. Obviously, you played basketball, but then you pivoted for whatever reason. And, if you could share that with us, I'm sure a lot of people would love to know how you got there.
Yeah, it's been a long process. Obviously, I played basketball, got a scholarship at Duke, ended up doing pretty well by my senior year, even though I had 2 foot surgeries during college and kind of had a very tough time coming back from that. But we ended up winning the championship my senior year. I was the starting center there, and it was kind of a great way to go out as winning your last game. And then, had kind of a cup of coffee with the league and got signed undrafted with the Nets after that. And then I had back surgery when I was with the Nets in training camp. Was going to come back, maybe bounce around Europe to the bottom of the league and, tweaked my back a little bit again while I was doing rehab. And I walked off the court and said, I'm done with this. I can't do it anymore. And so, had to figure out what I wanted to do next and spent some time bouncing around, figuring out, trying a couple different things. Ultimately knew I didn't really want to work for anyone else. I was kind of a fat kid at heart. So I was living in New York at the time. I saw the cupcake craze going. I came up with my own idea for cream puffs. And so I ended up building out a store in my hometown in Haddonfield in South Jersey, which is about 20 minutes outside of Philly. Because I didn't want to sign on a lease in New York before I knew anything of what I was doing. So got that up and running. And then while I was doing that, I was doing some small flips and small multifamily buys in kind of Haddonfield, Cherry Hill area. And the shop was great, but it was 7 days a week. My chefs were in at 4:30. I'm dealing with minimum wage employees. It's a retail food business. It's kind of fresh, cream-based product. I can't ship it online. I can't really store it at festivals. So while I was working on the real estate, that was going well. I liked the lifestyle, at least at the time, a little bit more. And, so I ended up shutting down the shop. I sold everything off, went around and asked, got connected with a Duke alum who knew somebody at Coaching at Wakefield in New York. Ended up being the former CEO, now chairman of Global Brokerage. His name's Bruce Mosler. Didn't necessarily have a spot for me on his team. He did office leasing and some investment sales up there. Stayed in touch, eventually offered me a position to come onto his team and went up there. Spent about 1.5 years, 2 years with him, realized it was great, very lucrative. They do extremely well, but realized I wanted to learn how to invest in real estate. I didn't want to do, office leasing even though it's a great business. And the majority of where money comes from for brokers in Manhattan. So I went to school at night at NYU, the Shack Institute of Real Estate, and got my master's in real estate finance and investment. While I was in school, I must have lost out on 30 to 40 deals in deep Brooklyn, Yonkers, Queens, and, to guys who were rolling up no inspections, 1-day cash closings. And, I just wasn't really prepared to waive all that kind of stuff and figure it out with, friends and family and my own money. And it was just too big of a risk to push too far. And the interesting thing about New York is that it also has rent regulation as well as rent control. And the way people make money with these small multifamilies is they kind of underwrite kicking people out of their apartment or getting them out of their apartment in order to raise the rent and renovate it. And there's a whole rule thing that there used to be, at least in New York. It's kind of like kicking grandmas and minorities out of apartments. And it's just not really the way I wanted to make my living. And so, had a friend who worked at Cushman who said he was going to maybe go back to Philadelphia. He's from the Philly area. Hey, Bri, have you ever thought about going back to Philly and doing investment? Maybe we could partner up. I looked into it and said, that actually sounds great, even though I loved New York at the time. And then I made the jump. He decided to stay in New York. And so came down to Philly and started trying to figure it out.
And just for perspective, what year was this? Was this early 2000s, late 2000s?
So this was
before
2015.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, 2015. I wish it was 2011. And I had actually looked at doing some stuff, with my family, who has no real estate background in 2011, 12, looked in graduate hospital, but I had no idea what I was doing. And so didn't really end up buying anything at that time, even though I wish I had started there. But you don't know what you don't know. I wouldn't have gotten the education or had the experience that I had in New York that allows me to be where I am now. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Brian. It's really just being able to take that first step to actually get into your deals, right? So what did your first real estate deal look like? What was that deal? How did you run the numbers on it? How did you know that this was the one?
Yeah, so my first deal was kind of jumping into the fire. It was, I had gotten hooked up with this agent who I had acquired online on their website about a deal that I think I found on Zillow. And then this automatic bubble popped up. And I guess it was assigned to her first. And she was at Space and Company in Philly. And I guess an internal email came around to her that said, hey, we're listing this, before it hits the market. And it was a 7-unit multifamily property on 12th and Pine. And actually the Wilma Theater company owned it, and they were using it for short-term housing for their performers that would come into town. And so I went in and did a full gut and got hit by the kitchen sink by everything. So it was quite the learning experience, but I bought it right. And so it ended up being great, but it was a hell of a first project. So
how did you fund that deal? Did you use hard money? Did you use your own cash? What did that look like?
Yeah, so used private notes from friends and family, and then eventually replaced that with a construction loan from a local bank. But I needed to close on it in like 30 days, so there was just no way to really. And I didn't have the cadre of bridge lenders, creative financing people at the time, didn't even know that was a thing. So, ended up raising some money on a note, threw a bunch of my own stuff in that I had earned, and went through 2 different contractors, had a structural wall fail. It was quite the process.
Yeah, as we all know here in Philadelphia, deals are not easy to get done for a multitude of reasons, be it the city itself, be it zoning regulations, be it dirty titles. Would you say that first deal was one of the biggest challenges you had, or would you say there's been another one that has been ever so more challenging? And if you were able to pull it through, what were the challenges that you overcame?
Yeah, I think that, look, the first one is usually the hardest just because you have to work out financing for the first time. I didn't have a steady income, so it was, hard eventually with the bank. And so, I also didn't know the Philly regulations. So, I get the use permit at closing and it says 6 units, not 7 units. And I'm like, oh crap, what's this going on? I'm past my due diligence. They're like having board meetings with the Wilma. We cancel that closing because I'm like, well, I need to get the 7 units. You guys should give me the 7 units. You said it was 7 units. And technically I only had the zoning category, not the 7 units in the contract. So they were trying to pound sand. I think they gave me a small credit, but not much. And I made it work. But yeah, I've had some pretty crazy stories after that, but nothing like that first deal that, because you just, whether it be title insurance or, all the little city stuff, inspections, like just everything happened. So it set me up for learning a lot, but, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to say there was a couple of them that have been easy, but most of them aren't that easy in Philly. It's older school owners and not very sophisticated. So, there's lots of title, as you said, title problems, inspection problems, structural problems, all this kind of stuff. Multiple owners that are fighting this and that. So it's always interesting.
Education is expensive, right? Definitely is. We talked a little bit about kind of some of the challenges in your business. Tell us like one of the greatest success stories that you've had in real estate since you started.
Let's see. One of the greatest success stories was this contractor who actually turned out to be the worst person I've ever met. But was riding in an Uber and saying he had people that were looking to buy deals. This Uber driver's brother owned a warehouse up in North Square, Kensington. It ended up being this massive warehouse. He wanted to retire. We got it under contract at a fair price, but was still pushing it for us a little bit. And I had a business partner for a while. We took it down together. And we ended up building 15 townhomes and a 6-unit building on the site. And that was kind of the biggest deal that I'd done new construction. Before that was 5 townhomes. So that kind of launched me into saying, oh, well, there was challenges with this problem, but 15 townhomes are pretty much just as easy as 5. So, stuff happens, but you just figure it out along the way.
No, that makes sense. Definitely does. And you're completely right. It's the same steps no matter what size the deal is, right? It's the same process, same funding, same everything. So yeah, if you have the capacity to go for it, just go for it. And even if you don't have the capacity to go for it, you should still go for it.
Yeah. I mean, people, it depends on, how you want to run a business. I mean, obviously raising outside capital, everyone has to do it for the most part at some point because there's just big check sizes. The more deals you do, it's just an extremely capital intensive business. But, what I've found is that, look, it's a limiting belief that you can't do big deals because the bigger my deals get, honestly, the easier they get. And so, you get to work with better contractors. They give you preliminary pricing, so you can run your numbers a little bit better. The architects run the whole process. So, now it's like, oh, you're saying I don't really do much, but say yes or no to a couple things with the architects. And then they give me the permits when they're done. Banks want to lend to you more. They want to give you more attention. A $10 million deal looks way better to them than an $800,000 deal. So across the board, it once you get to a certain point, that becomes really enjoyable.
That said, we all know that the money is made when we buy the deal, right?
For sure.
Right? So given that that's the case, when you're analyzing or underwriting a deal, do you have a specific cap rate, cash on cash return, or IRR, depending upon when your exit strategy is, that you must acquire for you to take it down?
Yeah. So I have literally 2 numbers at this point. And the further I've gotten along in my development career, the simpler numbers have become, because what I've found is, I've looked at tons of people's other pro formas, and, you can do it. If you're looking at an Excel model, you can do, okay, well, half my returns come from growth and rent growth, and somebody's underwriting 3% rent growth, or they're, or they're underwriting a very different construction number, or, an exit cap, or all this. And so the only two things that I look at now, depending upon the type of deal, is basically 70% ARV is where I want to be, or a 200 basis point spread between market cap rate and my build to costs. And so, that is what you should be aiming for, because anything less than that, and you're a merchant builder and you would need to sell every deal. Otherwise if you refinance, you're leaving capital in. And so your goal should be to refi out as all of your cash on these deals. Doesn't always happen, but that should be the goal. And anything less than, 125 basis point spread is going to leave you maybe in some trouble to fluctuating construction costs, exit, you've been leaving a bunch of cash in. So it's just gotten simpler. And, a couple of older guys that I know that, the richest guys that I know basically say, if it doesn't work on a napkin for your numbers, then you're just making up reasons why you're doing a deal. And so, it needs to be, and I'm not underwriting rents next year when I finish. I'm underwriting rents right now. So it's basically, you need that spread as soon as you're done construction, that should be your spread. And it's not like, then I hold it for 3 years and I get some cash flow in there, and I, underwrite that the rents increase 2 to 3% each year. And then all of a sudden my 30% IRR goes to 35 on the deal. It's just, those are all things you can't, control as much. And so you can kind of control your spreads minus some construction costs and obviously interest rates and stuff. But that should usually give you enough room to at least get out of a deal if everything goes wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of rents, I know you have some units that you're renting out, man. What's some of the craziest landlording war stories that you have? Because there's a lot, especially in Philadelphia. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah, a couple of the most recent ones was somebody DM'd me and said that my management company was effing up my money and your money. I've had, just last week, I have an Airbnb that's in Atlantic City, actually, and did this gorgeous renovation. It was a second floor deck overlooking the water, and a neighbor calls me and says, "Do you have a bonfire on, that you're, or like a fire pit on your deck that you allow?" And I said, "No." And I call my property manager, and I guess they literally brought in their own fire pit that looks like this old cast iron, huge thing. And they had it sitting on the second floor deck with the roof above, and smoke is billowing everywhere. And they're like, "We thought it was fine." And this is like 100-year-old historic house that, is wood everywhere. And, so, that's fun. I've had some fun evictions, not too many, but it's not a fun process in Philly, and obviously not enjoyable for anybody. But yeah, even if you have a third-party management company, you never stop making decisions, dealing with situations as an owner. I have a full team of 5 now on my development team, and they handle a lot of the issues, but it still gets back to me, and I make the ultimate decision. And you're dealing with people, and especially in residential real estate, it's tough with emotions in there.
Yeah, it definitely is. Mike, didn't one of your tenants one time makeshift install a bidet in the bathroom, and it flooded the bathroom or some shit?
Oh yeah. Tenants, some of my tenants are just, dude, I can't even explain some of this stuff. They just assume one thing, and of course they know that they can't. But, yep. And then they always ask for forgiveness later. But being as though Philadelphia has been, essentially your cradle of, your empire, let's call it. I mean, do you see any other markets that you would want to tap into as the years roll forward?
Yeah, so I've been pretty protective about being super local with my development in Philly. I feel like, that's how I get my competitive advantage. Philly's very neighborhood by neighborhood. So, rents change block to block. Construction pricing can even change by little neighborhood. That's where I get all my deal flow. So, the more time I spend away from that, I feel like I just get distracted, but I have been trying out new kind of investment areas and strategies. I'm actually really big on Atlantic City right now, and I actually live down the shore and go back and forth between here and Philly. And so working on a couple things in Atlantic City. It's a risky market, but has a lot of potential. And so, I'm slowly expanding my deal criteria as well as geographic area.
You mentioned you have some Airbnbs down there, Brian?
Yeah. So actually, I have a friend who lives in this nice little area on the water, bought a little 3-story, single family with a dock in this area that I really liked. It's kind of very quiet. And I saw this house pop up. That was cool, old historic house, and it goes out over the water, and you could drive a boat under it and dock it. But it had a bunch of structural issues. It was, kind of leaning a little bit. And I actually found out from one of the neighbors that it was Al Capone's bootlegging operation that ran out of this house, where they'd offload the booze from the water, take it into this big garage, and then ship it out from their trucks from there. And they used to have parties with Nucky Thompson upstairs. So did like a full renovation, tried to keep as many historic elements there as we could. But it was very tough project. But now we Airbnb it. It's a cool kind of experience down there. And I bought a bunch of waterfront lots in that neighborhood. And we're hopefully going to start building some 4-story single family waterfront homes with docks down there, and either sell them or rent them depending on how the finances work out there. And that's kind of a long-term bet for me in terms of liking the neighborhood, believing in where Atlantic City could go, and basically saying, all right, the prices in the South Jersey Shore went absolutely nuts in COVID. You can't get anything on the water for less than, $1.5 million. These homes are going to be 900,000-ish. And so despite Atlantic City's problems, there's really nowhere else to build down here. And it's the cheapest real estate, beachfront real estate on the entire East Coast. You've got 50 minutes to Philadelphia, 2 hours to New York, all the casinos with the shows and the restaurants. And so if it could get safe, and if you could build some nice product, it has just a tremendous amount of potential. So.
Yeah, well, what's his name is doing that massive $3 billion project down there, where the Post Brothers and Blatstein are trying to do. They still have to get approved by the New Jersey State, which I don't never count any chickens before they hatch there in terms of dealing with government entities. But Hard Rock has invested a lot in Atlantic City. The Ocean Casino has done a nice job with their reopening. It used to be Revel. There's most of the town, at least along the waterfront and the resort areas, are opportunity zones. So there's been a lot of opportunity zone capital that's gone down there that can hold for 10 years and kind of make stuff happen. So, I'm working on some stuff with a couple of groups there to build some townhome communities and just get stuff going. But, it's worse than Philly down there with some of the government entities dealing with the state entities. Everybody has their hand out.
And the taxes.
Taxes. People have been super comfortable with things down there for a while. So it's going to be interesting seeing it shake up over the next couple of years.
So were you a Wildwood guy? You used to go down to Wildwood?
No, so my parents grew up in Monmouth County, kind of central Jersey, and my grandparents lived up there all when I was a kid. So I never really went down to the South Jersey Shore that much. They'd always go up there because they could get babysitting, and we were used to kind of like Seabright kind of area up there. And then I met my current fiance, who's from Ocean City down here. And her and her family run a Sotheby's franchise here in Ocean City. So found us a place down here. So I'm back and forth between Ocean City and Philly now, and just getting accustomed to all the South Jersey towns. But, growing up in Cherry Hill, Haddonfield, a lot of people had places down in Ocean City, Sea Isle, Avalon, and a lot of Philly people have Wildwood. So it seems like everybody has a little short town.
Yeah, I'm a Margate Ventnor guy. That's where I used to, wander drunk in my early 20s, man.
Oh yeah. I'm at Stephen Cookie's a decent amount down there. It's and Ventnor's honestly becoming great. It's got some great retail. It's all crept over from Margate into Ventnor. Basically, people say, all right, for this price, I get 40-50% more space over here in Ventnor. And you can get by a beach block instead of this. So it's creeping that way. It's also creeping up towards, Atlantic City and into Atlantic City in that like Ducktown, Chelsea area or Stockton's building. They're just finishing 400 more beds for their university there, which helps a lot with, look, the problem with some of these towns, in my opinion, like Camden, Newark, Trenton, Atlantic City, is that, and even areas of Philly, is that there's just not enough density. And so, you look at Manhattan and some of the areas in Brooklyn and most of New York, and one of the reasons why it's much safer there, in my opinion, is that there's just more people around all the time. And even in certain areas in Philadelphia, it's like 2 a.m., you're coming home from a bar and you got this dark alley, even in Rittenhouse, and it's just not, the more people come into a neighborhood, the more lights are on, the more safe it gets. And so it just becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. And the problem is, in the 80s and 90s and those eras, they just knocked down so much stuff that it has to be viable for new construction to come in. And with new construction pricing going crazy over the last, 10 years, you can't build, but get land for free and build in Camden or Atlantic City and make the numbers work. So typically how a lot of these neighborhoods in Philadelphia have come around is that you've got individual rehabbers coming in and doing these little row homes and making them livable for good families and getting, eyes on the street, making these little neighborhood pockets work. But when you've got random townhomes here and there and some old apartment buildings and just swaths of open land, just very difficult to get things running. So the unions also in New Jersey are interesting. So that should be fun.
That's a great word for that. Interesting.
All the bridges going into Jersey, they don't charge you a toll to go into Jersey, only when you're leaving. Right? Yep. You ever notice that?
Yep. Yeah, it's they charge you a lot of stuff when you leave in New Jersey. I mean, I think they have like that 1% mansion tax of anything over $1 million. You have to pay 1% to the state. And I never understood those kind of incentives. I mean, Philly as well, with the extra transfer tax. I mean, it just kills you. It just kills you, and it disincentivizes, people moving and upgrading and things happening. When it's 7.5% to 8% closing costs between a realtor, transfer tax, and all that, it's just, you look at your number you're going to sell at, and you either lost money on for a lot of people, or you're not making much. So, I don't really know what the city's doing with that. So,
yeah, just to stay on the Airbnb topic. So, what are your thoughts about the short-term rentals in Philadelphia and kind of what that dynamic has shifted to just from the beginning of this year?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I think, I feel bad for a lot of people who, feel like they got, left holding the bag on a bunch of stuff. But at the same time, you really shouldn't be doing it in illegal zoning. People were doing it illegally, and they knew it. And, when you get, okay, there's a big difference between somebody has one or two and is using it for extra income, and they're good to their neighbors. And then I know a bunch of people who had 75 plus units that were operating all in illegal neighborhoods and illegal zonings, and you have parties next to families and this and that. So, and it takes housing away from the regular annual leasing or sale market. So I had any of the Airbnb I had done is within the CMX3 or above. And so I'm in pretty good position to take advantage of that. But, I get it. It should have been regulated but that's the problem in Philadelphia for the most part, is that when you let things happen, you let things go, and then you pull the rug out from under people, that's where people run into bad situations. It's more about being consistent, being upfront. Like, you don't necessarily care what the rules are. You just want to know that they're not going to be aggressively changing all the time. Because even for certain zoning codes or affordable housing or any of that stuff, it's not necessarily that people think it's a horrible thing. It's just that you can't start switching stuff in the middle of people buying properties. Then you switch their zoning, and then you do extra rules, and then, oh no, you can't do this height bonus. And it just disincentivizing people from investing in the city because we can't predict anything. It's like the same thing for the property tax assessments. Philly that's why most large real estate companies haven't taken a look at Philly, because you cannot underwrite what you think a new assessment's going to be. And it's just kind of a crapshoot. And, all right, that might not be as big of a deal for a property under $2 million, but, if you're doing a $100 million deal, it's a couple $1 million a year, maybe,
And just for reference, in case listeners don't know, Philadelphia has consistently, year over year, we've seen increases anywhere between 50 to 150% year over year, each year, for specific types of properties. And it's really just to the point where, like Brian was saying, like, it's just so impossible to underwrite anything, especially with the new regulations, the tax system, and then for all we know, they could do a whole new blanket zoning. So I completely understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know where the money.
I
don't know where all the money goes either, because the money's going somewhere.
Agreed. I mean, I think they had just like the Pentagon, they had like $100 million that they couldn't account for or something, and I don't know how that happens, but for example, the affordable housing thing. Look, I tend to believe if you actually gave us good, you incentivized us to build multifamily instead of these townhomes and single families in every neighborhood, maybe people would actually be able to have an affordable place that works for them. But if you're going to regulate it and do, affordable housing requirements, just give us enough time to figure stuff out where it's like, all right, this is going to go into place in a year, 2 years, that kind of thing, because you can't pull the rug out from someone who has bought a property based on one price, thinking that at that time they can do this, and then you switch it and make their numbers not work at all. While they might survive one project, they're going to not want to build in Philly anymore, because you can't do multiple projects like that all the time. Let's say you put a 25% has to be affordable units. That's fine. It's just you need to give enough runway so that land pricing adjusts accordingly, because right now, land prices are X, and based upon not having to do that requirement. And, if you switch it right away, one, people will have bought things that were way too expensive. And two, it takes time for sellers and other people to adjust. And so all of a sudden you can't get to a reasonable price with people, because nothing will happen for a while, right, unless you lay it out very clearly. And then every broker who sells a property says, okay, you have to build affordable. That brings the price of this land down. And then people will actually transact at that point. But, this, haphazard way of doing it just doesn't work.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. Brian, so you have a vast variety of experience in real estate with a lot of different things. One thing that we like to do here is kind of, what can you say to that guy that's trying to get into his first deal? What can you tell him to really have that confidence to actually go ahead and do it, right? What would you say would be the best place for him to start or for her to start? to really just make that happen?
Yeah, look, I think my advice to anyone, and I wish I had done this, is to have a decent job and buy a 4-unit or below, a 2 to 4 unit that you can live in, that you can rent out to people, that you can do it based on your income. You can get experience for going through the process. You can reduce your number one expense, which is housing. And then you can put yourself in a position, maybe you're like making even a little bit, per month, and you can put yourself in a position where you can make bigger bets, and you can actually, not have that nut of, home payment or rent payment or anything like that you have to pay for at the same time as you're trying to invest and get into development. And then, I would say from there, start trying things out. Start one home flip or buy another duplex. And then you don't need to double your deal size every time, but start, push yourself a little bit. Okay. I did it, and I would start small. So first duplex should be a cosmetic rehab. Then the next one, maybe you got to rip out kitchens. The next one, you have to rearrange some walls. Then maybe you do a full gut, and you have at least some concept of construction pricing, maybe some contractors that that you've had some experience with. Maybe they know some of the other trades. And then you can slowly build your experience. The only other route that I would suggest is go work for someone who's doing it already. And even if you do it on the side for free, a developer who's doing the type of deals that you want to do, try to find value to them, try to find them deals, try to even be a gopher for them. And if they're a good person, you'll learn enough, or they'll, have shown you enough to be able to execute on deals yourself. But, take it in chunks, learn it as it comes. And, then you can eventually build up to that point. And I don't think somebody needs to jump in like I did with a 6-unit gut. I would not suggest that at all. I figured it out, but it could have definitely gone the wrong way. So I think that's what I would suggest, is just take it one step at a time.
It's interesting that the house hacking continues to be the consistent theme from everyone that we talk to. Best way to get started. Because you're really just minimizing all of your risk at that point. You live there, so management, maintenance, it's very easy at that point. And you get rid of your living expenses all in the same token. So
and do not leave your job. Unless you have a lot of family money or funds squirreled away, or a spouse that can really, has a great salary and can totally support you guys and make sure that you're comfortable. You will not have enough to do that you can't do it and hustle after work or on weekends. You will not have enough to do. And even if you start getting into wholesaling, and all that, that's great, but you can still do that on the side and figure it out from there. And then once it makes sense and you are pulling your hair out with that amount of time, and maybe you have some cash flow coming in, or you have enough business coming in, wholesaling or being a realtor, then jump over. Or I would also suggest becoming a realtor, because finding deals is the number one thing. And if you can make finding deals your job, I think that's also a great way in.
When you have a W-2, it's easier to get loans too. So if you can make that transition while maintaining a W-2, you'll be surprised at how easy it is to actually get loans versus if you're self-employed. Well, we all know kind of how that goes, but when you're self-employed, you're going to make money, but at the same time, we have to pay our taxes. So
and banks don't count that kind of income really at all. Mm-hmm. But once you have a few deals under your belt, either go to, those deals, maybe you use the local community bank for maybe one of them. You start building that relationship.
Yeah, 100%. And then, to the flip side, let's talk about someone that's maybe a little bit more experienced. They've done, a couple multi-units, they've done a couple fix and flips, but they're looking to get to that next level and start scaling their business, kind of the same way that you have. What advice would you have for that person?
So again, it's all about deal flow. And Philadelphia, if I had done it over, Philadelphia is very difficult to build a replicable business model because there's so many different zoning codes. There's every lot's different size. There's different heights to every kind of building. There's rehabs. There's, multifamily. There's existing. There's new construction. Pick one category that you think there will be enough deals out there and that maybe you've done a couple of those, and simply search and wait for those exact deals to come up and build a deal funnel of doing those and getting known for doing those. And then you can start adding on to that as you build your experience, but find some sort of business model where you can use what you learned on the last one to keep improving. And then, if you want to go out and raise money, you have something where you go, we buy these 3 neighborhoods, 1 to, or 2 to 8 units, rehabs. We know our construction costs for those things are X. We know our rents are this price per square foot or per bedroom. And, this is what that looks like. We have our contractor. And then it's just about recreating that from a deal flow perspective and, and just finding more deals. Then you just find more deals and plug your team in at that point. If you not finding enough deals, you're either not looking hard enough, haven't built the systems, or you can start to expand it a little bit, but don't go too much at it until you have something churning and burning. Don't go too far outside of your comfort zone.
It's great advice. Fantastic advice, man. I'm on both sides of the coin. I'm
almost at the point where I have so much going on, I can't slow back down and pick one of them and hire a full acquisitions team and just go after those properties and specifically build it out. Even though that would probably be really, really great and successful at this point, it's very hard to put the cat back in the bag once you have a bunch of development deals on the table. So,
yep.
So let's shift gears just a little bit. If you didn't do real estate, right, what would you be doing? What are some of your passions if you had the time?
Well, man, that's a good question. I'm looking for them now that I, might have the time in the future. I know it's hard. I don't think I'd get back into basketball just because, my best friend is now, from Duke is now the head coach at Duke. And it was kind of always for me, I love basketball. Maybe I'd teach some skills or get back into coaching a little bit, but then I looked at him and I saw how much he loved it. And I'm not anywhere close to that. And so I wouldn't want, that was a direct reflection of, all right, I want to be as passionate as he is about basketball, about something else for me. And I don't know, maybe buying small businesses and doing it on I think I would be in business, rolling up companies kind of thing. I think if I wasn't in real estate, that's what I would be doing is, buying small businesses, growing them and, kind of doing an M&A kind of thing or mergers and acquisitions kind of business plan. Even though that's not exactly like a fun hobby outside of business. I just don't think I'd be happy not doing deals. So
we could set up a bootleg operation at your Jersey Shore house where Al Capone used to run it up, man. Yeah,
actually, that would be pretty fun. I definitely like my tequila. So
you turn into a museum.
That would be pretty cool. We actually put a bunch of plaques up that describe things where you walk into the little side vestibule entrance and it has this flip up old wooden stool that's attached to the wall where the guy with the Tommy gun used to sit and guard the entrance. You go up the stairs and there's an old ice box where they used to slide the big block of ice in, and then like metal covered refrigerator with doors on the side that's like literally just built out of wood and sheet metal. What else is there? Yeah, there's just a lot of really cool features to it.
You ever been to the Mob Museum in Vegas?
No, I haven't.
You have to check that out, man. I was there for my dad's 70th this past October, and we checked it out, and it was just so damn cool. They have a distillery in the bottom floor of it too, where they talk about the moonshine, the history of it. I forget what this guy's name was. I think it was Bill McCoy. Are you familiar with him?
McCoy, I know the name. It's like back in Prohibition for sure. Yeah.
So this guy made Al Capone look like he had no money. This guy used to be a retired Navy captain or something, and he figured out the loophole. He used to offload all of his booze about 2 miles off the shore, so he was still in international waters. And then what he would do is he would do 1 to 2 trips a year. And in today's day and age, it was like, I don't know, a couple $1 billion. It was like $5 or $6 billion that he was making every year. And he stored all of his money overseas. So when he got indicted by the feds, he spent like four months in jail, and all of his money was overseas, and he just hung out. It was the craziest story ever.
That's how they get you, is that tax evasion, right?
That's exactly how they got all of them.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, it was such a great story, though. If you had an opportunity, man, you should definitely check out the Mod Museum over there.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, the stories that have come out of AC from people that I've heard from neighbors and stuff, that era was wild.
Definitely was.
So in your career, or just in general, who would you say has been the most influential person on you, whether it be in business or just in your personal life?
Let's see. Well, my parents are absolutely probably the driving forces for pretty much everything I do. We're a super close nuclear family. My sister is around a couple years older than me. And so my immediate family, I'm super close with. I talk real estate with them, even though they weren't in real estate. Talk business with them, and yeah. So I just, I don't really have any real estate guys that I look up to. Unfortunately, I think that you meet a lot of people, and would you trade lives with them? Doesn't happen very often, especially a lot of guys I met in New York, might be killing it, but it's the people with the, kind of well-balanced life, people who have good family lives and a balanced perspective on real estate development and aren't just in it for their ego. I've got a couple of guys that I know that, I'd like to, model my business off of a little bit, but, for me, it's, I like people who are quiet, who go about their business and take care of their family and take care of their community. And so those are the type of guys that I look up to.
For sure.
That's great, man. So, here's a fun question for you, Brian, right? Let's say you won the lottery tomorrow for like $5 million, $10 million bucks, and you can't spend a dime of it on real estate, right? Can't spend any of it on real estate. What are you buying?
I'd say, I'm kind of boring with stuff. I'd probably, I want to buy real estate with it. I can only think of real estate. I think that probably just a portfolio of index funds that I could eventually get a line of credit on to buy real estate if that circumnavigates the process there. But yeah, it'd be nice to have, I'm so overweighted in real estate that it would be nice to eventually have a little bit of diversification, but it's hard for me to put money into somebody into somebody's hands who is not, I have no control over it. And that's the nice part about real estate, is having the control to invest your own money. And, that's one of the reasons why I love it the most, is I'm learning how to invest my own money better. And the returns you get in real estate versus handing it off to a third party manager are wildly different. So.
Yeah, definitely. Any fun cars, any fun toys you might buy? Boat, a little boat for your Al Capone house?
Yeah, I bought a boat last year, and I have the car I want. I am on the wait list for a Cybertruck. So I would definitely get a Cybertruck, and then I want a farm actually, but that's real estate. So, but hobby farm, a gentleman's farm. And my fiance was an equestrian, so maybe I'll buy her a couple horses. But hopefully if I have kids, they do not get into that, because I will never have to stop working. So.
Yeah, it is a very expensive hobby for sure.
Yeah, extremely.
Definitely is. What are you growing on the farm?
Let's see. I would like it to be in the South a little bit more, maybe North Carolina, so I could actually grow. Oh yeah.
Come on
Go back
down,
to
buddy.
my college roots. I love fresh eggs, so we definitely have chickens. Maybe I have a lactose problem, so maybe some goats, so I can get some goat milk, because it doesn't have lactose in it, or at least not nearly as much. And then my sister is actually runs a World Food Policy Center for Duke. And so she's super into like agriculture and agroforestry. So I'd like to grow, big rows of fruit trees and combine them with animals, and this whole kind of symbiotic relationship between everything. One day we'll see. It's a lot of work.
When you're ready, you come on down. I got you.
I'm in. I love it.
Yeah, have you been down to Asheville to see Mike, Brian?
No, I haven't been down to see Mike, but I spent some time out there. Obviously, I went to Duke, and so that Asheville, I had some buddies who family had some a cabin in like the Boone area, all the way out there, Cashiers as well. And it's my favorite. One of my favorite movies growing up was The Last of the Mohicans, and a couple of those like running scenes through like Western North Carolina with the waterfalls. I could be pretty happy with that.
So, is there anything else you'd like to mention or share with the listeners? Can you recommend any resources, any books, any podcasts, anything specifically that you've learned from, or you think that there was a lot of value that they can learn from? I don't think there's, obviously I've, read The Rich Dad Poor Dad and Bigger Pockets, and that's how I kind of got into thinking about real estate. So that stuff's good for mindset. What I would suggest is finding one book, one niche, and master that. Don't read 50 books, maybe skim through them to figure out what kind of strategy you like, but pick one, master that. And then once you're done mastering that, maybe you can add stuff on, but keep it really simple. I tended to be a dreamer and thinking I'm doing things by reading a new book each week. And then maybe I could do that business. And then maybe I could try that strategy in real estate. But I would suggest picking one thing, and specifically lasering in and finding every resource on that one thing. Don't get distracted, because there's 100 different ways you could go in real estate. Try one avenue out, try to work it, make it work, and then you can expand. But it's that analysis paralysis that reading 1,000 things, listening to every Bigger Pockets episode, you get excited about a new idea and then you don't implement it. So, while I wouldn't recommend any specific book, I'd say pick one niche. Yeah,
it makes sense.
Yeah, the retention, a lot of, like you said, some of that stuff is like so great when you hear it, and then the retention of it, how to execute on it, always kind of falls by the wayside.
Yeah, it gives you a false sense that you're doing something too, and you can very easily distract yourself and make yourself feel better. It's kind of like self-flagellation, basically. And thinking you're taking action, but that's not really action. So, find one kind of niche, read as much as you can on it, find people who are doing that niche, whether it be on Twitter. You can literally search any niche and people are tweeting out about type of deals that they do. DM them, reach out, see if you can ask questions, follow them. They'll post deal updates. YouTube, some of them's YouTube channel, they might only have 200, subscribers, but they know their niche. And so find a niche and figure that one thing out. It's the only way to be competitive.
For sure. That's great, man. That's great. Before we finish up here, Brian, I'm curious to hear your thoughts of, the market as a whole over the next, let's call it 5 to 10 years. Where do you think it's going? I'm hearing a lot of stuff about, uncertainty about rates and kind of, market starting to soften. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, the rates make things super difficult to underwrite, especially on a multifamily side, when there's, the multi's been, the cap rate compression there. The cap rates are so low on these things that any kind of fluctuation really affects your proceeds at the end when you're finishing these projects. So that's very difficult for the next foreseeable future until rates come back down or at least level off a little bit, because right now guys have bought deals banking on lower rates, and they're getting to the end of their deals. They either have to come up with more proceeds or sell, which that's the distress I could see in the market, along with some of these really hot South, the Sun Belt or, West Coast markets that had just, as crazy as people think Northeast markets had run-ups, these other markets had twice as much of that. So I can see those markets struggling a little bit with home buyers, at least who bought it the last second. You have a lot of these companies like Open Door that lost money on basically every house flip that they were trying to do from an institutional standpoint. So that kind of supply is coming back on. But, a lot of these Northeast markets I feel pretty good about. It's just very difficult to build in them. So that, while there is a decent amount of supply coming on, it's nothing in relation to a lot of these other markets. We just chronically underbuilt, especially single family homes over the last, 10 years compared to demand. Millennials are at their finally 33, 34 is like the peak time when they go out and it's household formation. So there's a lot of things that are still working towards that. And then for me, the market's bifurcated though. You've got lower income people who are suffering. Anybody under $700,000-$800,000 in terms of home price, is going to now become a renter because they're their payments, that they're looking for new, it would have been $2,000. Now it's $3,000, and they're basically buying a payment. It's almost like a lease payment. And the higher end, $1.2 million, $1.5 million plus, they have, investment accounts. There's been a major run up over the last 10 years. They have family money. They have a banker that they know what to do with getting an arm to get a lower rate. So that market I see as continuing to be pretty good, as well as the rentals. It's going to be, I don't see that much distress, but it's going to be, another year of people trying to figure out legacy projects that they bought wrong.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some sub-institutional, say, $20 million or less, distress for people who bought it wrong prices, can't refinance, have to sell. And then on the institutional side, which is going to trickle down, there's these reallocations that these shops have to do. Like they're overweighted in industrial, or they are overweighted in Sunbelt stuff, or they, so they have to sell, or the stock market went down. And so they now have to reallocate, and they can't have that amount of real estate. And so, there's forced selling going on in a lot of different markets, that it doesn't make sense, but that's what happens on an institutional level. So there's going to be a lot of mispricings, a lot of little opportunities that people can find in the next year. But, I think rates are probably going to level out, or it's going to be an election year next year. Somehow they magically, go down every election cycle. So hopefully that happens again, and we'll see. I just hope people are take advantage of the next year to get their house in order.
Certainly. And I think that's the good news. I mean, there's going to be opportunities here. There's going to be opportunities to buy some of these projects. If it was institutional capital, they're not theoretically, they're not in the business of, real estate for some degree. And some are, some aren't.
Yep.
But, if it's a matter of getting it off their books, it presents opportunities to other developers like you and I and Dom.
Yeah. And the problems that I've seen arising are just bank debt or bridge debt, and that kind of stuff. There's still a ton of private capital out there, and they've been sitting on the sidelines since for a long time, 08 or whatever, saying there's a crash for the last 7 years. And they've been waiting for it, and it hasn't really happened. So this is, I guess, a little mini crash that people are going to jump on. So, I just don't think that there's going to be that much, maybe I'm wrong, but that much distress just based on the fact that there is so much capital at the higher end out there that's searching for yield.
Well, Brian, I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom and your time. I truly appreciate you. If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know. You always share the good news, and hopefully we can get some deals done in 2023 and the future, buddy.
Love it. Mike, Dom, thanks for having me.
It's the good news, man.